We have online with us today some very special guests and some very special souls. We're all special. So we've got Michael McPhearson joining us. We've got Brittany DeBarros joining us. On our panel today, we have Mike James, Natasha Erskine. I hope I got that correct. And we have Brittany Santel and myself, Miles Megasyfe. And we are going to be talking about the issue at hand, Black Lives Matter, the movement for Black lives, social justice sweeping the world, and basically catching everybody up in the excitement of it, the necessity of it, the timeliness of it. And we will talk about active GI members wishing to dissent and or disobey orders, what that looks like. That's why we have two former officers on with us today to talk about what it might look like from that perspective, being given illegal orders in the field. We're going to share some perspectives from where we are in our corners of the country, and we're going to be taking questions. So we hope you have questions for us, and we have people moderating our chat room. Please enter your questions. If we don't get to them this week, we'll get to them next week. I think with that being said, would anybody like to say some words right now about their week, how they feel, before we move into another hello and greeting? Everybody feeling good, feeling lively? I'm an artist. I'll just eat up a little bit of time right now and share something that I've been working on. I've been writing a lot since COVID-19 and Black Lives Matter. And this seems like a perfect stage to share it. Nature cultivates the virus. Our cultures get along. Modern ag provides us the perfect ride along. We shop in live meat markets like there ain't nothing wrong. We got overcrowded pens. I gotta write a song. Pen's a metaphor for cages, animal or human. I'm here to free us all. My purpose is what I'm pursuing. Never nervous, but feeling worthless is so confusing. It seems that work is just the perfect play that keeps us losing. Please keep your social distance from me with your long arms. Recidivism is my religion, no more harms. Melt ice jails operated by for-profit private prisons in bed with Senate who by their charms. And we at home together, but home ain't all the same. Some don't have a home or shelter, those shall not be named. Some protest the stay-at-home order, they insane. Some ain't safe at home and never spoke, they feel ashamed. I've heard you place an order on call in secret for help. Well, as a nation, we should place the call for someone else. Replace the waste of breath and space in his racist elf. Look out for public health at all cost, our source of wealth. Happiness on longevity, praise essential workers. Economies should value people over what we purchase. We only buying because we buying that we so imperfect. Now that we dying, we finding out that dime ain't worth it. You know, we have been locked down as a nation and as a world for a couple months now, and people couldn't come together to support each other. Some governments couldn't come together to support each other. And so quickly, fears emerged. Within the first week, I was watching my friends worry about paying bills and eating because our leaders did not step up in the right ways and responded with militarism. So we're going to talk about over-militarized police and militarized cities and what that looks like, the response to that. You know, there's people in Minneapolis right now holding down blocks because the cops have retreated. And we have people online right now from the front lines in Seattle to share with us. And we're going to get into this. So it's 4:08. I know when I was in the military, I was a Marine. I had already failed my piss test, my urinalysis after 3.5 years of honorable service. And I had been busted down to a private E1, all my ranks stripped from me and sent out to 29 Palms, California for a little deployment at the end, right before I little training right before I got kicked out, but I didn't get a rifle. I got put in the chow hall because they wouldn't put a rifle in my hand. And coming through this chow line, I see a major, a full bird colonel coming through with his flight jacket on. Never seen a black pilot before. And I just had to ask him. I just had to say, I just had to ask him if he was a fighter pilot. And he pulled me, he called me in close and like leaned into me. I didn't know him at all, and said, "You're looking at one of 20%." He said, "You're looking at 20% of black fighter pilots in the Marine Corps." And this is the year 1996. There were 10,000 fighter pilots in the Marine Corps, and he was 20%. There were 5 black fighter pilots. You know there's a problem when only 5 black fighter pilots can be in the whole Marine Corps. All right. I think next I'd like to hear from Natasha about your experience in the military with racism, colorism, what it was like to you. Tell me your story. Tell us your story.
Peace. Thank you for everyone for being here with us today. Really, I think it's important to say like why we created or co-created this space. I think it was important for us to answer the call, amid COVID-19, amid the justified national and global unrest for Black liberation. When I say Black Lives Matter, it means a whole lot to me. I'm from the South Side of Chicago. I have seen my local government not make everyone feel as safe to exercise their First Amendment right. And as a veteran, that weighs on me because I know that that's not what we all had intended when we took an oath to be of service to this country. And so, just with that, I'm very vocal and talk about my experiences in the Air Force across 20 years, where the one thing that was constant was, racism, bias, sexism, and all of the traumas that go along with being a Black woman on active duty in the Air Force, the least diverse branch of them all. And one of the things that was really painful to me was the people that saw things that weren't right, the people who participated in, the bad acts, those that benefited from it, right? And so, I talk about this now of like, the white supremacy that I observed in the Air Force was a team sport. Not everyone was the extreme or outwardly racist person. Not everyone was biased, but there were a whole bunch of folks who were silent, right? And in that they were complicit. And so I really wanted to, just in the way we co-created this space, I had the airmen who are still on active duty and still wearing those boots in mind, because we have to start talking about these things. One thing that's also consistent in the Air Force is discrimination of Black airmen, and that dates back to the Tuskegee Airmen and even before. And so, for me, what I see is important too is, for the officers, I know we have 2 of our guests are former Army officers, is, how the commissioned officers who observe things, who would pull me aside and say things in the office and then, command in a different way. And so that was also frustrating for me because I thought we took an oath, and integrity first was our one of our mottos or values in the Air Force. And I just saw people step away from that when it benefited their promotion or their OPR. So I'm excited to hear from CGOs or former CGOs who can tell us, company grade officers, who can tell us, their experiences, and hopefully there are some lieutenants and captains out there who will be brave in this moment. So peace, thank you for being here again, and I'm excited to hear our panelists today.
Thank you, Natasha. Thank you. I'm excited too. I love the context you put to your sharing. Mike James, I would love to hear about your experiences in the military with colorism, racism. What have you seen? What did you experience?
All right. Thanks for having me. This is fantastic. I love being here. Thank you for the poem at the beginning. I feel like that was kind of the burning of the sage, and it cleansed the atmosphere, and I appreciate that. Um, yeah, so I was in the Navy for 6 years. I got out in 2014. I was a photographer. I was a public affairs person who ended up serving on the ground, well, serving loosely defined. I ended up working on the ground in both Iraq and in Afghanistan. Um, as far as, I don't want to take up too much time here, but for me, I just want to really drive home that we have to acknowledge things. For people who are still in the military out there, you got to understand a couple things. They're going to be hard to get your heads around, and it took me several years to understand it. One, that empire exists, and the United States is an empire, the largest one to ever exist by orders of magnitude, and we use an enormous amount of our energy and our dollars to spread that empire and extract wealth and resources from underdeveloped and colonized countries across the world. And two, that class exists. And it's important to understand that in the United States, the empire and the military feed on the working class. And that's really the vast majority of people who join the military. And, from my experience, I found that the vast majority of young people that join the military don't do it from an overwhelming sense of patriotism and service. They do it because it's the only functioning jobs program that the United States offers for young people. It's the only job where you can go out and get a salary and benefits and have some kind of reasonable expectation for a blue collar life. And that's done on purpose. That's by design. The reality is that money, it's all a pittance, and it's bribing you to go out and do violence against brown and black people all over the world. And as we see these protests developing across the United States, the empire is coming home, and the working class are going to be asked to turn around and point their weapons right back on the citizens that they think that they're serving. And so I would ask all people who are still in the military right now to take a hard look at that and to think very seriously about it. And I'm here as a resource. If anybody has any questions, I'd love to talk about it with anyone. It's all I think about. It's all I do. It's what I do. So yeah, I'll pass the mic. I'm happy to be here, and thanks for having me.
Thank you for that astute class analysis, Michael. Mike, sorry, you got a lot of hearts and loves on the chat while that was going on.
Beautiful.
They enjoyed you. Brittany Chantel, can you tell us a few words? Would you like to share? Are you in that space? Would you like to share some experiences?
Yeah, totally. So just to give some context, I joined the Army National Guard in 2011, fresh out of high school. I was a huge Marine Corps JRTC kid. I was all about the JRTC. Excelled very quickly and in my class, and I had this picture painted of the military that was not crystal clear. I had rose-colored glasses on for sure. I then crossed over and did ROTC and became I became an officer, and I commissioned as a second lieutenant in 2015. A lot of my experiences in the military, my negative experiences in the military come from the little boxes that you can put me in. I'm lesbian, I'm biracial, my mother is an immigrant. So a lot of the things that were directed towards me is, about my identity. One thing that kind of comes to mind right now as an experience is I was at basic training actually. And this was kind of my first experience with racism and just the system as a whole, where I kind of like woke up a little bit. There was this drill sergeant, and we were in line at the DFAC for chow, and he came up to me and said, "Private, what are you?" And I said, I was confused. I said, "Drill sergeant, I don't understand your question." He said, "What are you?" I said, "A female drill sergeant." I didn't know what he was trying to get at. And he said, "You're not answering my question, Private," and put me in the front leaning rest, and then asked me, "What are you?" And I said, "A soldier, drill sergeant." And I just did not know what he was trying to get at. He made me do push-ups. And I think after doing like 50 push-ups or something like that, he had me get up, and then got into my face and said, "I'm going to ask you one last time, what are you?" And I said, "I'm an American soldier, drill sergeant." I just didn't know what he was getting at. Long story short, he pulled me out of the line at the chow hall and took me outside. And he said, "If you're not going to answer my question, you're not going to be eating for a long time." And I said, "Drill sergeant, with all due respect, I don't understand your question." And he said, "I'm asking you, what are you mixed with?" And I said, "I'm black and I'm white." And he said, "Now, wasn't that just so easy?" And I was like, "Yes, drill sergeant." He said, "Go back into the chow line." And I was so confused. I'm still confused to this day, of what the purpose of that was and why it became such a difficult thing. Because, if that's really what he wanted to know, he could have reframed the question. But that's an experience that kind of pops up in my head. And, it as someone who is so high ranking, to do that to a private, it's just, I'm at a loss for words, honestly, thinking about it, because there's other things that I'm remembering right now, that are far worse than that. But, I'm happy to be here. I want to make sure that everybody knows their rights. I want to make sure that, officers are being honest with themselves and being honest with their soldiers. And I kind of want to define what that means as well. So I'm happy to be here. And I'm excited to get this conversation going.
Thank you for sharing, Brittany. I know it can, once you open the floodgates, it can be hard to shut them. So, or to navigate. So I would thank everybody for sharing. I know it's difficult, and open the floor up to our first guest of the day, Brittany DeBarros, who was a commissioned officer, and I'd like you to tell your story about how you defied orders and what it looked like, and if you could put it into context with today's with the national uprising, and where you think a young officer, person of color, outspoken person might be coming from, right? Commanding a platoon or a squad.
Sure, thanks, Miles. And thanks y'all for having me. Again, my name is Brittany DeBarros. I am the organizing director and a member of About Face Veterans Against the War, as well as Veterans for Peace. I am a proud, queer, also biracial, Afro-Latina, and white woman. I use she pronouns. And so this moment fundamentally is, and also as a working class person, as Mike mentioned, this moment, right, is fundamentally inextricable from who I am outside of my military experience, right? This is about my people. and the right for my people to have the freedoms and justice that this country promised them, that it has never given them, right? And in fact, you know, promised them while trampling the rights of the indigenous people who occupied this land and stewarded this land before this country was founded. And that's important to name as well. But about my story, I was, you know, I made it to be a captain in the Army. I was a psychological operations officer, and before that I was a logistics officer. I deployed as part of the invasion of Afghanistan. And by the time I got there, it was, you know, I think more appropriately called an occupation, an ongoing occupation. I was a true believer when I deployed to Afghanistan. I thought that I believed what, you know, what I was told in the media by my command, all of those things. I was a pretty politically aware person already, actually. I believed in racial justice. I was involved in reading about and studying gender justice. But what I lacked was I understood the ways that those things played out interpersonally, because of course I did, because of who I am, because of my family. But I didn't understand the system that those things were connected to, right? I didn't understand that the white supremacy that I experienced and understood, and the patriarchy and all its forms, right, including transphobia and homophobia and all of the different pieces of that, were fundamentally about maintaining a system of exploitation, right, of us, and the ability for a wealthy few to be able to continue using people like me and people not like me, right, for their own gain and for their own benefit. So I didn't see that full system. So at the time, when I was applying for an Army scholarship, which I eventually got to go to college, and was a huge motivator for me, just like Mike said, I thought, well, you know, yeah, there's some at the time, don't ask, don't tell, and women in combat, and all of these things were being, and including the wars, right, which were already started. I was in high school. When I was applying for that scholarship, it was 2006. So the wars were already in the news, right, being debated. All those things were being debated. So I thought, you know, there's some problems with our military. I realized that. But it's not going to change unless different kinds of people, different kinds of leaders who are willing to do the right thing, right? Leaders like me are willing to join and make those changes from the inside, right? Because it's all but an inevitable institution. So at the end of the day, that's the only that's the only way I understand change happening, right? So at the time, that logic makes sense, right? To some of y'all listening, you're probably sense to me. Right? It misses that piece about the system that says, actually, you can't just have more trans leaders in the military or more Black leaders or more women leaders and expect that system, the purpose of that system, is actually going to transform itself, right? That misses that one little piece, but that piece is the key.
Britt, I don't want to interrupt you.
No
but
worries.
we lost you for about 30 seconds there. We lost you. Very pivotal transition right before you made that point. Can you say that piece again?
Sure. Can you let me know where I dropped off if you can remember? Speaking.
It was just as you were speaking.
Okay.
About.
Sorry about that. I closed everything I could to make my internet as good as possible.
You were talking. You made so many connections to what Mike said, and really captured the piece about Brittany as well, like how the intersectionality of all these pieces for you, the realization you, and then like most of us do, illusioned, and you're telling us about your waking up, like we just missed like the last. It was such a great piece.
Okay. Okay. No worries. So I'll just try to give the recap, right? Which is that, you know, at one point when I signed up, I knew that there were problems in the military, and that was in the news, don't ask, don't tell, women in combat, right? All of these things. But because I didn't understand the core system, right? I didn't understand why the military was actually doing the things that it's doing overseas, right? I didn't understand the role that it plays in our society, in our empire, like Mike said. My analysis was, okay, we need to address these discriminatory policies. We need to make the military more, more just in the conflicts we're getting involved in. But the only way that's going to happen is if different types of leaders are willing to join, right? And are willing to make those changes from within, because it's all but an inevitable institution. So again, I was saying, some of y'all in the military or some of y'all not, right? Veterans, reflecting, whoever might still think, well, yeah, that makes sense, right? Like, how else is it going to change? But the problem is that, again, more Black leaders, more women leaders, more queer leaders, trans leaders, right? Like, at the end of the day, there's not enough of us. We can make those policy changes, right? And it has an impact. So I don't want to deny the importance of work that's to undo the trans ban, things like that, right? That are vital. But it's important that we understand those things as harm reduction for the folks who are in the system, right? For the economic reasons that have been named, for all of those things, as opposed to a strategy for actually transforming into a system that produces the results that we say that we want, which is justice and freedom, right? And all of those things that we are told that it's about. And so, when I fast forward to the moment where I realized, I deployed to Afghanistan. I thought I was going to liberate the Afghan people, to protect them from violent groups that wanted to harm them, right? Those were the things that I thought, that's what I was on board with that. I was like, yes, and I am willing to do violence, and I am willing to die for a cause like that, because that is about protecting people. It is about, service, the things that we're told. And yet, when I got there, I saw something that I've already heard from National Guard troops that have been reaching out, happening in their units, that they're seeing, right? Which is a whole bunch of leaders of all ranks who are just pumped to get their stripes, so to speak, right? They're like, I'm finally going to see action. I'm finally going to do this thing. And they're uncritically like, if the military, we're the USA, right? If the military is asking me to do this, it must be the just thing. It must be the right thing. We're going to go help people. We're going to go protect people. And yet, if you don't see the full picture, you don't see the fact that in almost every people's uprising that has fought for actual freedom, actual justice, when the National Guard has called out, there's been violence, escalation, and it has been used to squash those fights for freedom and justice, not to support progress towards those things, right? And so in this moment, I came back from Afghanistan, after arguing with countless officers above my rank about, hey, I'm told that our mission is to support the Afghan people. We're training their engineers to do route clearance, right? Which means to go find bombs and safely dispose of them in the road. Why are you saying that you're going to go do a night raid in this village? And also that's not our mission. And they're like, well, they're not cooperating. They're not giving us intelligence, right? This is one example of countless throughout my deployment. And so the next realization for me was, even if this is the right mission, this institution is fundamentally wired for violence. It's designed for violence. It is not designed for protecting these people. It is not designed for building healthy, safe communities, right? And stability and all of these things, because you have people who have been conditioned, desensitized, and trained to do violence. And so I think that brings us to this moment, right? Where you think, okay, I might feel weary about this, but I'm going to try to protect people. That's all I'm going to do. And you tell yourself, well, if I'm out there, even if something happens, I'm going to make sure I do the right thing. I'm going to protect people. And yet, at the end of the day, you still end up being a person in a uniform who's standing there, right, in an institution that is fundamentally designed to do violence. And that is something that, if I could do everything over again, I wish that I had stood down before I went to war. I wish I had stood down while I was in war, right? And yet it took me, I still was in this mindset of, I'm fighting to do the right thing though while I'm here, right? And so it's okay. But let me tell you something, and that was enough at the time, but let me tell you something, years later, I'll never get that piece of my soul back. I'll never. It doesn't mean I can't heal. It doesn't mean that I don't forgive myself and understand those conditions that I was put in, right? And ultimately that I was used and harmed by the same system. But it means that I acknowledge my role also as a person who did harm and was willing to participate in that harm. And nothing changes that. You know, all I can do is try to make the right choice going forward. And that's why I wanted to come here and share that with young soldiers and folks who are probably struggling with this question right now, so that hopefully some of you, even if it's one of you, can make the decision up front, right? You can have a little bit more insight into the full picture than I did at the time. And you don't have to spend the rest of your life knowing that you owe your people, because that's who it was, right? Whether they're Afghan people in the United States, they're my people. They're poor, they're brown, they're working class, and they're exploited by the wealthy few. And at the end of the day, I have a lot more in common with them. You have a lot more in common with them, right? So I don't want to go on for too long, but I'll fast forward. For me, you know, I don't want people to think I'm asking people to do something that I wouldn't do myself. It's different, right? I wasn't mobilized at the time, but I was still in the, I was in the reserves, and I got orders to go on annual training orders. And at this point I had started to see the picture more clearly, and I had started speaking out. It's telling me my connection is unstable. Is it still, can y'all still hear me okay? Okay, cool. And I realized, you know what, I can't just, even if I'm not in war, right? Even if I'm not mobilized, at the end of the day, I'm leading troops. I'm training troops. I'm doing all of these things under under the guise of freedom and justice and all of those things. And I believed in those Army values, right? And I had to look myself in the mirror as a leader and say, you know what, these 18-year-olds, these 19-year-olds, I'm responsible for their life. And at the end of the day, I'm responsible if they go to war and die or get hurt or kill people and harm people, right? And it was for a lie. It was for a lie. That's on me, right? I don't get to blame that on the system because I'm still supporting it right now, and I can't do that. And there are moments, I think, in our lives where we have to decide who we're going to be, right? Where in that moment, that decision shapes us. And for me, I decided it was a small thing, right? But I started posting facts about the DoD, just facts, literally facts from government websites that were publicly available, such as we're currently bombing 6+ Black and brown countries. The military burns 10 million gallons of oil per day, things like that. And I got put under investigation and almost court-martialed over it. And, you know, for me, I'm proud that I ended up, on the list as a national security threat and all of this bullshit. But at the end of the day, I looked at it and I said, you know what, I'm risking prison time. I could be thrown in military prison for this, and I'm good with that, because at the end of the day, I'm responsible for these lives. And if I was willing to do harm and I was willing to put my life on the line for these troops, for this cause, then why would I not be willing to risk at least that much to do the right thing, right? For actual justice, for actual freedom. So that's me.
Brittany DeBarros, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your insight post, after getting out. Thank you for sharing the vulnerability, the not knowing, joining the military like so many people do, illusioned, and then being outspoken LGBTQ community, speaking out for everyone's rights, for all of our human rights, and representing Indigenous peoples, First Nations. Thank you for putting this in a great context. I really want to ask Michael, there's been a lot, and I don't know if you want to talk about an experience where you disobeyed orders or where you shared something like that, or if you want to talk about what's going on in Seattle right now. I don't know what you want to do, Michael. I'll kind of let you speak. We're a little bit over time for where we planned, but I don't want to take anything from you. So I kind of want to see where you want to go with it. And there's also, I want to ask you a little question too about the peace movement here in our country and our organization, Veterans for Peace, because we've been going through things and about face, and all these movements go through things, and we're peace activists who were trained how to harm. So now we're supposed to deliver peace to the world. How does that look to you? You speak on what you want to speak on, brother. Thank you for being with us.
Yeah, thank you. First, I want to say thank you to everybody. I especially want to thank Brittany DeBarros for her words just now. I mean, there's almost nothing left to say to people about how you need to think about this, honestly. I do want to say, and I'll get to your question about the peace movement in a second, but I want to say real quickly, that if there are any active duty or reserve National Guard people listening to us, you don't have to have our political perspective to understand that being out in the streets against your citizens or other people who are not in the military struggling for what's right is not your place. You don't have to be, liberal or progressive or radical or any of that. You can be conservative to understand that that's not your place. I ask people to, as Brittany did, to make a decision now, to think about this deeply now, not to wait till you get orders where it's hard to think about things. You feel a bunch of pressure. You don't have a chance to look into what your options are. Or you might be afraid because right now, I'm supposed to be getting ready to go. You got your first sergeant and you got your company commander screaming at you or whatever to move, let's go. Make a decision now. And one of the things, it's funny because this morning I got an email from Vets for Biden. And I don't know how they got my email, right? And it's funny because a bunch of people wrote back, how'd you get my email? And these were people that are not in the peace movement per se, but how'd you get my email? And one of them said, the military is supposed to be apolitical. So I want to speak to that real quickly. There's truth to that, right? In the democracy, to the extent that we are, the military is supposed to be under civilian control. And when you're on active duty, the Guard or the Reserve, it's not that you can't participate in politics, and you should go to Veterans for Peace website and About Face to find out what you can and can't do. But you can vote, you can talk about your ideas. When I was active duty, and anytime I was asked a question, I gave my answer. And one of them was, at the time, because this is 30 years ago, which is kind of funny to me. I'm thinking, wow, 30 years ago. But I was in what they call the first Gulf War, which I consider to be the first ground and air campaign of the current wars that we're in. So we've really been in the Middle East for at least 30 years of warfare. One of the things I would argue with my command about as a lieutenant, I did go in as a private between my junior and senior year of high school. So I've had the private experience and the non-commissioned and the commissioned officer experience, but I would argue with them about gay people being able to serve in the military. So they knew my position that yes, they should be able to serve, so I got pushback, but I didn't care because this is my opinion. So you can do that in the military, but you're not supposed to get, deeply involved in politics. True. However, and this is what Brittany, I think, is saying about herself, and what I'm asking whoever you are, wherever you are on the political spectrum, you have to live with yourself first and foremost. First, you are a person. Second, you are a citizen. And third, you're a soldier. And when you do things that you know are wrong, you get something called moral injury. And I think everyone has experienced that at some level or another. A low level is something happens to a friend. Maybe they got into a fight and you didn't help them. Maybe someone was treating your sister bad, but you were around your friends and you didn't want to, you're trying to send your sister off, but you feel bad later. Any of those things, we all have done something that we look back on. We know that was not the right thing to do. And we think about it. We might even think about it years later, but it doesn't destroy us. We try to deal with it. But the worst, if the action is something that's really bad and you deeply know is morally wrong, it can destroy you. So this is the reason why you have to ask yourself these questions now, because you want to be clear whether or not this is something that you want to put yourself in a position to do. Because if something happens, and I'll give you an example. In Louisville, a man was killed, and I can't remember his name, unfortunately. And it's been determined that a National Guard bullet killed this person. Okay. Now, how did this happen? They were trying to break up a group of people. And from what I can understand, they weren't necessarily doing anything wrong. They were just gathered. And you know how the police, when they get ready to take the street and tell you to go home, if you don't, they start breaking it up with tear gas, and sometimes they start using the rubber bullets. So that's what they started to do. The police did. So according to the story, now how true this is, I'm not sure. The officer, not the officer, I'm sorry, the guy who died shot back at them after they did the tear gas and started shooting rubber bullets. And the police and the National Guard returned fire. Now, who started that? It sounds like the police started this. So the reason I'm bringing this up to you as a service member who might be in this situation, as Brittany said, you might go there thinking, I'm just going to do the right thing and protect people. But just like in war, the momentum of war takes over. So the momentum of that moment took over, and then you don't know what you're going to do. You really don't, because you have to make split-second decisions. So that means if you're not ready to shoot people, which means you would be shooting fellow citizens or immigrants, people here in the United States, you don't need to be out there. That's how I feel. And I ask you to think about that. Now, Brittany said she wouldn't ask you to do anything that she hasn't done. So I'm going to say to you, I was never in a situation where I had to make this decision in real time. But back then, the United States and the South African government were allies to each other. And there was a struggle going on in South Africa back then, meaning when I was in the military. And I thought, and honestly, I don't think there was a real possibility of me being deployed to South Africa. But I went through a mental process about whether or not, if I was called to go, whether or not I was going to go. I thought deeply about it. And I decided I wasn't. And the reason I decided is because the people of South Africa were going through what my ancestors had gone through here, and a similar type of white supremacy that I faced then and face today. So I didn't see how I could go and protect that government. And lastly, I had to look into my mother's face, my sister's face, and now that my son, 20 years later, 30 years later, he's 36 years old, but he was a little boy, at some point while I was serving. I would have to look at his face, and he would ask me, what did you do when you were sent there? I want to say I didn't go. So those are the kind of things that I would ask all you service members to think about as you contemplate your service during this time in our country. And I have an article that I'm going to be publishing hopefully soon that speaks directly to that. In terms to answer your question, Miles, about the peace movement, I'm really going to answer that in terms about my expectations for this moment. I've seen a lot of these moments, but not to this extent. This is a huge one. This is a definitive time, right? I do believe that Michael Brown was a smaller version of this moment. And many of the demands that are being made were introduced to some degree on a larger scale. So it made this moment much more possible, and people more able to digest some of these demands that they totally pushed back on back then. And even in Veterans for Peace, I see people who push back on our involvement in Ferguson. And some people saying things that calling Michael Brown a thug and things like that in our organization. I see some of those same people on board now. So sometimes it takes time, and people have to be told over and over and momentum to get to where you want to go. Okay, fine. But the thing is, Dr. Barber says we're in the third Reconstruction, which means there were two, which means that they were incomplete. Will this one be complete? By that, I mean, will we really get down to the real issue, not just police brutality, because everybody's impacted by police brutality. They kill more white people than black people, but disproportionate number of people of color are killed. So police kill people. So what we're going to see, I think, is if you don't want to call it reform, a different way or whatever of policing, right? So fewer people get killed, but really get to the issue of racism and all of the structural problems of racism. So that's my concern. And as far as the role of the peace movement and white people in general, I'm just saying the white people and the people in the peace movement, stay with this. Look into your own heart. However good you think you are, or even if you're a man, as good as you think you are, we still grew up in a patriarchal, racist society. There's no way you can escape it, however nice and good you are. If you are a white person who thinks that you don't do racist things or have racist thoughts, you need to check that. That's part of how all of this is going to change. If you're a man that thinks you don't do anything patriarchal, you're tripping, because you do, because you can't help it. The only way that you can dismantle that from yourself is to work on it. And you're not working on it if you don't think you can do it. You know, if you don't recognize you're an alcoholic or a drug addict, then you can't change that. And it's the same thing I want to say to white people right now. You all have to examine yourselves. And the other thing I think you all need to do is reach out to those other white people who really don't care. Because let me just say this, and I'll let the thing go. Right now, we're seeing a number of white women who are reacting negatively. You've seen all these videos, you know, the Karens, as they call them. You see all these videos of white women doing things, but you're not seeing necessarily as many white men. But don't think that they're not acting out. Okay, they are in some way. And men, all men, when we act out, our acting out is violent. Our acting out is not lecturing somebody or screaming at somebody. It's violence. So what I need for many white people to do is reach out to these white men and these white women who might commit acts of violence against people of color, and start to check them now, start to explain to them, start to push them. Because the only way this is going to change, white people have to change white people. I can't go and change a white person's heart. I can talk to you and maybe change you some, and that's going to be because you want it to. You're looking for it. But if you're not looking for it, it's going to take a white person to push you in the direction to change. So that's what I have to say to the peace movement, but white people in general. You know, first, look into your own heart and figure out your baggage. Second, go out and talk to other white people. Don't let this movement, and I'm not talking about for the police thing movement. I'm talking about economic and social justice for people of color, but that really means for all people, because when you lift up Black people, everybody gets lifted, right? That's been the history of this nation. So if we really want to see these structural changes, white people have to get out there and make it happen.
Thank you for that, Michael. I love that. I love the call to action on your part for the military to stand down and to really assess what's going on. I love the call to for white people to self-assess, and from Brittany DeBarros as well. You know, look at yourselves, right? You're asking troops, you're asking active duty military to look at themselves. Brittany Chantel wondering why that drill sergeant was in her face. You know, they want to break you down so they can fill you up, right? And when you get into these combat situations, you don't ask the questions. So being asked now to ask yourself the question is very important. This whole thing about defunding the police, I see we have people in our chat, our internal conversation. I'm seeing y'all. We're talking about defunding the police on a national scale, and we are talking about that's because of the over militarization. Who on the panel wants to speak to? Do they see a connection coming in the collective consciousness of our nation and perhaps the world about seeing the connection between over militarized police and these, you know, hyperinflated budgets for military, of course, in our country? And can that conversation, do you think that conversation is likely to come as, you know, as people look at themselves and as countries continue to look at themselves and wonder where their money's going? Do you see people questioning the imperial nations? Do you see that in this movement?
Yes, great question. And great comments to the speakers. Like I was all of that. So when it comes to police, listen, I'm in Chicago, particularly the South Side of Chicago. And I mean, I feel like I can just say that and go back on mute. But the reality is, amid COVID-19, I mean, historically, the Chicago Police Department has misbehaved. They currently have a federal consent decree to force reform, to which they have completely blew through the deadlines. And if you watch the last couple of weeks during peaceful protests, you can tell where they escalated. And then, listen, I talked about this a little bit last week. I cannot tell the difference between the local police department and my former unit in the Air Force Special Operations Command. And I say that because they dress alike, they act alike, their training is the same, and their vehicles are a part of a program that I told you that I participated in. And so with all of that, we have a militarized police department that refuses to comply. Where have we all seen that? Hard to change. And until not any of us are safe, we're saying here our current fight is for our children that attend Chicago public schools. There are over or almost 200 cops that are in their schools each day, overwhelmingly black girls, poor and marginalized youth, and young people are arrested and on the escalated path from classroom to prison. And so we are really pressing upon our local city council and the Board of Education to take a vote to remove these police out of school so that we can reimagine what that $33 million contract can do, right? Our young people deserve books that are current. They deserve resources and restorative practices that actually mean something and feel like something, so that we can cure the harm, not just what was already done, but amid COVID-19. Staying home for 4 months is just not normal for teenagers. And so, for schools to be able to do that, police are not going to get them across that line. We need counselors instead of cops. So I'll yield. But yes, I think that it is important that we make the connection between DOD. We talked last week about the 1033 program, that military waste and excess is what is given to these police departments. And quite honestly, I think they think it's a video game, or they're reliving, because a lot of former cops are also former military, let's be clear. And so that comes with adrenaline that a lot of us seen when we deployed. So it's unnatural for us to be in a space where today we still think police are needed in order for us to have a safe city.
Thank you, Natasha. Thank you. Spoken like a proud parent, spoken as a proud Black woman in this country of oppression and violence. I thank all of our panelists for being on today. I thank everybody for being on the show. Give me a nod or give me some sort of a sign if you have something that you want to say that you feel needs to be urgently said. Otherwise, I'm going to take us out of here. All right. I love y'all. I think do I have one person who wants to speak?
Jump in real quick.
Okay. Say your piece.
I think I might be on a lag. Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to shout out that, we're not legal professionals. I'm not claiming to be, right? And we all know that there's a difference between what you technically are allowed to do in the military and what you can get away with. I, for example, didn't actually violate the UCMJ. My command, after investigating, was clear on that, which is why they still recommended court-martial charges, but they had to do conduct unbecoming an officer, because that's their catch-all for we're mad at you, but you didn't technically do anything wrong, right? And so we need to be real about that, right? But I talked earlier about, we signed up to take risk for what's right? And this is a moment where we need to do that. So if you want to talk about your options, we have a team of peer support of vets. You can email support@aboutfaceveterans.org. And you can also reach out to Veterans for Peace. You can DM us on social media. And you can also call the GI Rights Hotline, who are even more deeply trained to support you about your options. And we also, all of us are in touch with networks of lawyers that can support you if you decide to move, right, and take action. And so none of us are here to tell you what you should do. That's a decision you have to make, a moral choice that you have to make for yourself. But we want to support you and connect you to the resources that you need to do the right thing. And the last thing I would say is just remember that this weekend is Juneteenth. That is sacred celebration time for Black community and Black folks. And so we're asking everybody in solidarity with Movement for Black Lives If you are a vet, use the hashtag Vets for Black Lives. Get out there, put it on your signs, show up, right? We have a lot of power, social capital as veterans, and it matters when we speak up, especially on these questions of safety and security and on what's good for the country, right? So it's important for y'all to get out there. And if you're not a vet, still get out there. Check out it's spell out the word 619.org or go to Movement for Black Lives website, and you can check for events near you. But definitely important that y'all hit the streets this weekend and demand that we defund the police, invest in our communities, invest in Black community in particular, and build the country that we deserve.
Hey, Miles.
Brittany, yeah. What's
Yeah,
up, Mike?
just real quick, you asked me about Seattle, so I just wanted to say that what you're seeing in the news from the administration, there's not chaos in Seattle, and there's not disorder. There's not violence. Certainly, at times there's frustration, and there's people having to de-escalate disputes between people, just like in regular life. People are gathered together trying to figure out how to create a better world, and demanding justice, demanding that there's police accountability. One of the things that came out of Ferguson is that there's no accountability whatsoever. And so people are really demanding that. I don't know what all the specific demands are from the autonomous zone, but I do plan to. I've been there I've been out a few times. I went to the autonomous zone once. I'll be there again this weekend. You can go to my Facebook page and you can see some things that I have already up live from the autonomous zone and other, like a silent march that we did for Black Lives. So you can see these things, and I'll keep putting that out because, the opposition is lying to the nation so that if it uses violence against us, it'll look like we're monsters. But we're not monsters. We all have families we love. Our families love us. I'd rather be chilling out. You can smoke marijuana here in Washington without getting in trouble for it. So chilling out and drinking a beer, watching a movie. That's what I'd rather be doing, just like anybody else. But we're standing up for what's right, and don't believe the hype about Seattle, because it's not what's happening. That's all.
Again, just the love. I feel a lot of love coming from the panelists. The call to check yourself is not. We're not telling you to stand down. We're not telling you what to do, but we're just asking you to look into yourself. And thank you, Brittany DeBarros, for bringing that up and pointing that out. The phone number for the GI hotline is 1-800-877-4487. That's 1-800-877-4487 for the GI rights hotline. If you are wondering if you have questions about what you can and can't do. We have an email at veteransforpeace.org as well, standdown@veteransforpeace.org if you have questions, if you want to ask somebody via email. And like Michael said, and all of us said, really, and Brittany DeBarros said, it's really about, there's a lot of mutual aid, going in this movement. And we have to lift up each other's voices. What I'm saying? This is a very crucial time. So it's a time to come out and unify around that you might not have unified around before. Peace movements all need to unify. The movement for Black Lives intersects with environmental stewardship, and intersects with LGBTQ rights. They all merge together. They all help to defeat capitalism. You know what I'm saying? They're all oppressed by capitalism. If we have a few minutes, we'll get out of here with my song, No Fear Now. Again, we put out the call to the global community for people to share music with us, movement music. So No Fear Now is up on YouTube. You can check it out. And it really came about because my son asked me to write a song about COVID-19 and what we needed to do. And then in the midst of writing that song, Call for Justice came. And so the two got merged into one song. And Natasha's gonna share it for us now on Facebook. I thank y'all. I love y'all. Shine your light. See you next week. Peace. It's good. It's good. Let the sound run. It's good.
It's what we need, what we want. Love. I give love. I want love. I have love. Wash your hands, get it right. Good hygiene could save your life. Keep your hands out your face, especially in a public place. Not least the last, wear a mask. Take that class from Megan Side. You can save a life, take a doc's advice. Not lots of light, no bleach to taste. With a yes and a no, economies closed over pathogens we can detect. The long incubation time in DNA fake and make the chain look correct. When in fact you could be infected, impact your loved ones with that neglect. Let's face it, the president's basic. Unlike his officers, needs respect and love. I give love. I want love. I have love. I give love. I give love. I want love. I have love. I value my freedoms, defend our rights, and I'll tweet it to let you know. With a post on the gram, long form on Facebook, YouTube, with the live show. I will allow some material, pour in the spiritual milk for this physical flow. Don't sit back and watch as we get to March and let's see how far we go. Stop spreading misinformation about hydroxychloroquine. Close contact and bumping into me in stores ain't happening. I'm not dying for a country that just sees me as a good again. They don't even see me unless it's because of questioning me. I'm in. What you want, man? Love. I give love. I want love. I have love. I give love. I give love. I want love. I have love. Hubris makes us vulnerable, also quite intolerable. Thinking we the best to pull wool over these vegetables. I ain't living miserable. Race and hate ain't invisible. Take a knee, indivisible. While my rights ain't admissible. King is capital. Queen is corona. If he holds the crown, she is the owner. Who is the master? Who's the controller? Can he give it up? Will she pass us over? That love. I give love. I want love. I have love. I give love. I give love. I want love. I have love. Diamond, oh, what a sound. Platinum I got laying round. Gold, power to behold. SARS-CoV-2 rare to be found. Diamond, oh, what a sound. Platinum I got laying round. Gold, power to behold. SARS-CoV-2 rare to be found. I want love. No fear now, speak love. No fear now.
Yes, that was dope.
Much love. Thank you. Are you hosting us now?
All right. Peace, everyone. Take care. Thank y'all for being here today. Can we go off mute and just say farewells to each other before we end?
Peace, y'all. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone take care. Hope to talk to you soon. And see you.
All right.
See you.
I would love to see y'all. It was great to see y'all online and great to hear your voices. I miss y'all.